Good afternoon, dear friends, and why not say good evening since we'll be running to our evening with this amazing moment that we have put together for each one of us. And we also ask for your contributions by sending your good vibrations, your good thoughts to this amazing moment that we have in our hands right now. Welcome to this amazing streaming of the SSB. One more talk during this amazing month of February, almost towards the end. But here we are, strong and continue in this amazing year of 2021. Today, with an amazing friend here with us, Marco Magalhães. But before we pass the word to him, we would like to do the usual, which is read a passage of the book Happy Life by the Spirit Joana de Angelis through the hands of the medium Divaldo Pereira Franco, pray together, and then go through some information about Marco as well and the talk tonight. Joana de Angelis in this amazing book says, "Nobody reaps in another's field when it comes to moral values. Everyone is his own heir. Immortal spirit that he is, he evolves from stage to stage, like a student in the school of love. There he repeats the lessons when he errs and gets promoted when does it right. In this way, in one existence he picks up where he left off in the previous one, corrects what was wrong, or begins a new experience. Pain, however, may force him to carry out what he does not accomplish out of love. This way, let us pray for one another. You may close your eyes, find a comfortable position so we can truly assess all the information that will be provided to us here. It's also important for us to connect with our mentors, the mentors of our Spiritist centers if we're connected with one, but most importantly, to acknowledge our presence here. We ask, dear Father, Mother God, help us during this moment where we'll be studying about ourselves, about the changes that Spiritism offers to us, the elements, the tools, everything that we can benefit from to become a better human being. We ask for your guidance, not only for each one of us, but also for our speaker of this evening, our dear friend Marco Magalhães. Send him good vibrations to his family and to all of those around him. And we also ask that this amazing moment that is at our disposal right now can also reach the hearts and minds of our brothers and sisters who are in need. Whether knowing Spiritism or not, we send them the powerful thought that we are eternal, that we can make changes, adjustments, correct the things of the past, as our dear friend Joana de Angeli have said, and most importantly, be a brother, a sister that can change the environment for the good, better than yesterday, and tomorrow better than we are today. This way, we are thankful for this amazing moment, and so be it. As we were saying earlier, we have our dear friend Marco Magalhães here with us. As usual, we like to introduce our dear friends, our guest speakers here at the SSB, by letting everyone know who is this person, right? It's important. It's important for us to cover this because it brings value to the work that is being done in many areas of the world, as well as here, collective with the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, as we try to enlighten our lives together. Marco Magalhães is a clinician, scientist, and assistant professor at the Faculty of Dentistry, University of Toronto, and staff oral pathologist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. Marco Magalhães has 12 years of research experience focusing on cancer and cell biology and has made numerous contributions to our understanding of oral cancer. Marco started studying Spiritism 10 years ago at the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center in New York, and has since dedicated himself to Spiritism. Marco is involved in the unionistic meetings and actively participates in activities at the Toronto Spiritist Society, Kardec Radio, and Canadian Spiritist Council. He's also a husband and the father of 2 beautiful children, and the third one on the way as well. So it's always good to have someone who is involved with so much, but also dedicating time to talk to us and enlighten us as well. And we come to ask, right, what tools we have, since he's going to talk about good spiritists, what tools are offered by Spiritism. Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, us. So what are good spirits? What are perhaps the hurdles that we have to overcome? Here it is. Marco Magalhães here with us to talk about good spiritists. Thank you, Marcos, and welcome.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction and for having me here today. It is a pleasure and opportunity to be here with all you guys. And we're here from this our cold north neighbor here in Canada, but with very warm hearts and a little bit of sunshine, as you can see poking through the window here. So we're happy to be here and happy to be united in this message of love and charity that Spiritism brings to us. So without delaying too much, let's talk about what's the topic of today, which is good spiritists. And I think Leo did a great introduction, not only to the topic, but the idea of what can we do and what is it, right, to be a spiritist. And that's something that I've certainly worked through my entire life to better understand and to be here today as a student, learner, but also helping and sharing information with all of you guys. And even from my perspective as a scientist, that's something that I've always worked very, very hard to improve, is our understanding of like these principles of like what can we do better, right? So what is it that we're doing collectively, right? What is this? So if you're coming to Spiritism now and you're just being introduced to it, or if you've been Spiritist for generations in your family, we always have questions that are important for us to always ask ourselves every day. Is that first of all, what is it to be a Spiritist, and are we all Spiritists, and are we different, and how? Like, what does that mean? Like, what do all those words mean? Even it doesn't matter how much you're studying or you understand the topic. It's always important to look up to what Kardec brings to us and try to make that connection very strongly, right? So let's talk about a few things that I find very interesting. So let's go back in the book Letters and Chronicles by Brother X. On chapter 7, Brother X describes this very, very interesting passage from Kardec. And it starts like this. Kardec hears, when he was writing the Spirits book, he hears about Martin Luther at the time, describing one of his dreams of visiting paradise, right? Heaven, right? And he obviously felt incredibly touched by that. And it did happen with himself while working very hard to get all this incredible book together with all these questions and reviewing material. He falls asleep one day, and he's met by a spiritual mentor who takes him to the umbral. So Brother X describes, going through this dense clouds, a very dense atmosphere, seeing a lot of suffering spirits, and the collective emission of all those spirits, generating a very chaotic scene at the time. So Kardec, when he arrives there, he would ask the mentors, like, who are these people, right? The spirits. And judging by what he was seeing at the time, he asks, so are these spirits involved in Jesus' crucifixion? I guess they're all here, right? He asks to the mentor. And the mentor replies, nope, not at all. All of those who at the time didn't really know much about what was happening, didn't really know the rules or the law of God that much. they've learned, they've went back and reincarnated many, many times, and they're not here anymore. Happy spirits. So he continues, and then what about all the Roman tyrants and Caligula and all those individuals in history that committed so many atrocities? Like they got to be the ones that are here now. Then the mentor said, "Nope, not at all. They're not here anymore. They already found their path. They're certainly well into their pathway of spiritual evolution." And nope. And then Kardec continues, so, well, what about the persecutors of the first Christians? They got to be here, right? The ones that that took the early Christians to the circuses and do all sorts of atrocities to them. The mentor asked, nope, none of them are here. They had no idea what they were doing. They've learned through their experiences and mistakes, and they're very well into higher places. And then Kardec asked, so who are these people, right? And then the mentor answers, well, these are all the Christians, or the ones who were exposed to the laws of God through any particular religion. And these are the ones that, although knowing about the law of God, intentionally decided not to follow it. And it's much harder for these individuals, according to the mentor, explained to Kardec, to go back and reincarnate and continue, because they have to face the consequences of their own decisions, knowingly what they've decided to do. So Kardec then wakes up from that dream and writes question number 642 of the Spirit's book that says this, and I'm going to read directly from the book here. So, in order to be pleasing to God and to ensure our future situation, is it enough simply not to do what is evil? That's the question to the spirits. And the answer is very clear. No. All must do good to the best of all must do good to the best of their abilities. For all will answer to all that evil that has resulted from the good that was left undone. So it's not enough, according to spirits here, very clearly, just to, not to do bad things, right? Or having the knowledge to do so, don't act on it, right? Because it is important to do all the good that we can, right? Now, thinking about this, that obviously when I first read this book, it made me think about a lot of things, right? And I like to bring this personal perspective on things, right? When I first started studying Spiritism, as most of us do, we become, from a moment that we clearly had no idea what was going on, to the second stage was like this awe of understanding of everything we're doing that may not be right. And then the third step was like, well, now that I know, I got to do something. And that is the most challenging part, right? And I got to do something now because I really want to, and do what I'm actually reading, what Jesus is telling me to do, right? And that is always the most challenging part. And when I read this passage, now I clearly understand, and I think that is one of the key messages today, that we're in such a blessed opportunity, all of us connected, like with any religion, particularly in Spiritism, of having access to an enormous amount of information that is available to us from many, many sources. And this is the information that is not new. So Spiritism is not coming here and say, hey guys, we're going to change everything now. No. It is really giving to us in a very clear, didactic, and in-depth way the same message that was brought over and over and over and exemplified over and over and over, right? And the same message that Jesus came down here and incarnated just to show us, right? And this is what we have. So when I look at the message here from Umbral and Kardec asking, like, are these all, because we do this all the time. We tend to see we see someone doing something negative and say, we still have that judging eyes, right? Like we can't see that gigantic thing in our eye, but we tend to see the little things on everyone else. So we can say, oh, that spirit, yeah. When the world changed to regeneration, they're gone out of this planet, right? We do that in Spiritism. Like, that's something that we may not say it, but we do it sometimes. And it just reflects exactly on this, is that, that's not the case. We're all going to be, going through our actions and our understanding and our decisions at some point. And you got to start working on it now. That's what Kardec's saying, right? So let's keep going on that topic now. So in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there's this very interesting and concise definition of what a true spiritist is, right? So the true spirits are recognized by their moral transformation, the efforts, and that word is critical. And you're going to hear this in every lecture talking about a good spiritist. What is it? What does it mean to be a good spiritist, right? It's like the efforts that you make to overcome, your evil inclinations, or your ideas and thoughts and your baggage that you bring that is still anchored in the past and the mistakes of the past. So obviously the effort that you're doing right now to make changes is really truthfully speaking volumes to what being a good spiritist is. And then I'd like to give another example. So when I first started studying Spiritism, and although I've had the experience of being visiting or participating in Spiritism for many, many years, when I started studying it, I remember one of the most incredible experiences that I had. It actually was the driver for me to understand what this is actually knowing a few friends in Spiritism that you could clearly tell that there was something different about them in a way. The effort they were making to do little things and to correct things and to go through challenging situations unfazed and with marching on with incredible faith, that was something that touched me. And I actually asked them, like, what is this? Tell me, right? Because at that time, clearly I would say that my faith was not, not even close to that level. And I was like, okay, so what am I missing here, right? So it was one of the big drivers for me, right? And now, after many years of studying Spiritism, now I come to full circle understanding the concept, right? That a true spirit is really like a good Christian, right? And someone who's really working on a day-to-day thing and working hard and doing the best. But at the same time, it's like, well, but that kind of confuses me too, right? And follow this thought process. So if that's the case, then, well, there's a lot of spiritists that I not even know they're spiritists, right? Isn't that the concept? So the concept of a true spiritist is like recognizing someone who's working very hard on their moral transformation and the efforts they're making towards that. My goodness. So if you look around, our whole planet and universe is full of examples of individuals that are on that road and maybe a lot ahead of us, right? Although we're coming from different backgrounds and perspectives, right? So that's always something very interesting to think about, So another thing is that, what about the concept of, maybe I can't comprehend in detail all these very complex things that sometimes people talk about in some spiritist lectures about, of this type of energy and vibrations and things and that, very clearly, if you read the Gospel according to Spiritism, which to me is one of the most quintessential books in our understanding of Spiritism, there's nowhere in there that we're saying that a good spirit is the one that detains that incredible amount of knowledge about incredibly complicated things. It comes down to the point that really there's nothing to do. It's primarily a moral concept. So much so that Allan Kardec, when he starts writing the very first book in Spiritism, the introduction to Spirit's book, he says, well, and then in the Gospel according to Spiritism too, you can disagree with a lot of things. He's telling us. So Kardec, so again, we forget Kardec sometimes. We like to learn about these incredible fancy things, right? And then we kind of don't go back to what he's telling us. So he tells us this, you can disagree with a lot of things about Jesus and Christianity, and you can disagree about historical facts. You can disagree about technological facts. You can disagree about a bunch of things. Like, people can disagree on a lot of things, rituals, right? But there is a bonding principle that you can't really disagree much, which is the moral perspective of Jesus and Spiritism, obviously. And you can't really disagree with that. And again, so much to the point here that, when you talk about being a Spiritist, is really about working on your moral transformation. That's what actually Kardec's telling us right now, right? So this is one of the key principles that I want to really pass through today, right? But obviously, that's going to come with a few more questions, right? And the big question is, are we all Spiritists? And do we have non-Spiritist Spiritists and Spiritists that are non-Spiritists? Do you get that? Yes. And that's kind of, interesting concepts, right? But if a true spirit is someone who believes in the idea that we should love one another, and someone who works hard towards moral progression, then you start to see examples of this everywhere. And that's so beautiful because it's telling us exactly what we already know, that God is one, right? That created all of us. And in all of us, that same message is embedded. It doesn't matter where you're coming from to reach that message, right? So there's so many examples. I'll give you just a couple examples close to us here. And if you don't mind, I'll just close my window because the light is probably bothering you a little bit. I'm sure you guys not going to mind that. Okay. So if you think about that, Mary Granger, which is a Canadian, she worked for about 40 years in the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, close to us here. She worked her entire life comforting kids. They're going through hard times and disease, and she never had one. So her entire life was devoted to helping kids in need. You have, Jennifer White, which is also a Canadian here from Toronto, that lost her daughter, Olivia, when she was 5 years old, 2012, to sepsis. And after that, she worked with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Princess Ball, for all the kids going through, chronic diseases. And it was so successful that at the time, she was, the first one, she sold over 500 tickets in 30 minutes to raise money. And now it turned into a major event that she helps every kid, supporting them through the hospital stays. So many right now going through a pandemic that are dedicated their entire lives just to help individuals who are suffering, right? There are so many examples around us, right, that we see individuals that are working really, really hard on their moral transformation and trying to make things for others in a selfless, charitable, loving way, right? And in the Medium's book, Kardec addresses that, and I read, as you see, I'm going to be talking really about the basic books today of Kardec. In item number 26 and 27, the Medium's book, you'll see Kardec is going to talk about this. So these are spiritists that are unaware there are spiritists, right? And here I'm just going to read directly from the book now, so you guys can follow me. Okay, so some hesitant individuals who are usually spiritualists out of principle. So it means spiritualist means like you just believe in something more than matter, right? And a spiritual component of existence, right? Most of them have a vague intuition about a spiritual ideas, and they aspire towards something that they're not quite able to define yet, right? So Spiritism can come to these individuals and like a ray of light, right, and connects them with the clarity they need, and dissipates that fog that goes around him. How many examples of that we see around, right? You have spiritists without realizing it. This is Kardec. He's going to tell us, properly speaking, there's a variety of nuance of proceeding class of individuals, even though they have never heard of Spiritism ever, per se, they have an innate sentiment about the grand principles they're guided, right? And these are an enormous amount of individuals incarnated today. And the reason why I'm talking about all of this is that it wasn't even once or twice or probably 1,000 times that I've seen many people in the Spiritism and the movement entirely with this very interesting attitude of superiority, of moral intellectual superiority. And this is something that is very, very problematic for us. And I think we should work on this very carefully, not only as a movement, but individually. So how many times I've seen and see Spiritist colleagues, right, that were very quick on criticizing others because they are somehow believing that they're seeing a situation from a superior point of view, just because they have the knowledge that Spirit is brought to them. But at the same time, clearly, they have completely lacked or forgot the moral component, right? Or forgot that the moral principle, the guiding principle, comes from the same source. And reality is that we're all embedded with that. And as Kardec is telling us, there are many of us out there that never heard about Spiritism and are far way ahead of us in a moral evolution, right? And certainly they're learning. They're learning a much harder way, probably, right? Because of the resources we have available. So that is something that is one of the warnings that I have in general for everyone, is that be careful, right? Whenever you're thinking, particularly now, the world is going through a lot of changes and learning opportunities, right? Some people are suffering really, really hard. And I've experienced it firsthand because both me and my wife have been working through the pandemic in the hospital. And we're seeing consequences of things, right? And how many times I've seen individuals with the knowledge in Spiritism, with the intellectual component of Spiritism very well developed, but again, very quickly lacking on the moral principles of Spiritism and denigrating or attacking other individuals for believing things that are contrary, right? Or disbelieving like scientific principles that have proven so many times that the risks and the mortality associated with this disease of COVID, right? And you see this all the time, right? So it is a big warning sign for us, but also an opportunity for us to do better, right? And Kardec is very clear about that. Okay, so we have Spiritists without realizing. We have Spiritists that are unaware of their Spiritists, right? And we have more. So Allan Kardec brings us all to us. So we don't. So see, that's the blessing. We don't actually. We have this available on our hands. So he talks about different types of Spiritists, right? And let's talk about this. So he describes the experimental Spiritist, right? Which is the one that believes in the concept of Spiritism being some sort of only scientific component where you can experiment, you can interact with spirits, it's almost like a phenomenological component, right? So you're interested to see the phenomena. It's interesting to see the communication, right? It's interesting to see all of this, but realistically not looking at the moral concept, right? The Spiritist that, the one that we see very often is the one that say, hey, I know it, but I really don't do it, right? And these are the ones that, do as I say, but not as I do. And again, this is, this is something that we have to work very hard, right? Individually, because you see the responsibility of what we have in our hands, right? We have the knowledge now. Remember what Kardec did when he was in his dream. It's like, who were there? It's actually the guys that actually knew it, like us. This is who we are, right? So it is quite important, you know. So I'm a million times happier to see, someone, giving a lecture or experience, or talking to someone in Spiritism and sharing the experiences they've been through. It's like, say, hey, I did mistakes, but here I am, I'm learning with them. Then this super amazing individuals who have the incredible capacity of memorizing things, incredible capacity of delivering a nice lecture, but may not be completely connected to the moral experience of what we're going through, right? And this happens in every religion. We're not different. We're not special, right? So just because I'm reading Spiritism, I'm not a saint. I'm not like a higher being, right? I'm here. I'm Marco, right? I do a lot of mistakes. I work very hard to try to fix them. But in a day-to-day basis, we're exposed to challenges and difficulties, and we're always learning. And that is really what Spiritism is about, right? So what else we have? Kardec tells us about the true or practicing Spiritist, right? Which believes, and so it's not only the one that believes, but believes and uses the knowledge to improve with effort, right? See, again, we're not talking about really a lot about a scientific concept here. We're really talking a lot more about the moral wing or the moral side of things, right? And obviously they have to work together, but the element that differentiate us really in the end is the moral principle, right? Kardec talks about fanatics and exalted spiritists. Is Kardec reading the future? Right? So Kardec, obviously, this is an incredible spirit that got a mission that, I would have said no right away, and it's just incredible. The mission that we're looking here, the result of it, and he's already telling us what we're going through now and what we're going to go through in another 500 years. So I hear people saying, yeah, I read Kardec, but I really like to look into his books. We talk about all this fancy tech things. Like, that's great. But if we don't have a basis of what we're doing, it's going to be very hard, right, for us to know how to analyze things like Kardec does. Remember, he was primarily a scientist looking at methods to understand Spiritism and phenomena. So we should borrow that from him, right? So he talks about this, and this is how he describes it. These adherents are more noxious than useful to Spiritism, right? They're less capable of being convincing, since their judgment is rightly distrusted, right? This is Kardec, right? They're easily fooled by fraudulent spirits or by persons who try to exploit their gullibility. Do we have this today, right? And again, this is not a special thing to us. It happens to everyone, everywhere, right? But again, it's a nice warning for us, because Kardec is already telling us, like over 150, 160 years ago, that is telling us that, you're going to encounter these situations, right? Let's keep going. So on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter number 17, we're going to have this nice summary, right, from Kardec about, being a good Spiritist. And this is what he says. I'm going to just read straight from the book again. So the truly good person is one who complies with the laws of justice, love, and charity in their highest degree of purity, right? If they examine their conscience concerning their own actions, and this is an exercise that I try to implement every day in my life, and I really, really would suggest that, as a friend, as a Spiritist, as, to all my colleagues, and I think this is interesting, examining the conscience, their own conscience, and ask that Kardec is telling us. If they have violated these laws, if they have practiced any evil, anything that goes against that, if they have done all the good that was possible, that's a little bit tricky, eh? So we got into a territory here that, remember Kardec saying the very first passage that I read. So these are question 642, right? So what you should do is just that you don't do bad things, right? But you do all the good possible. But then you ask Circle Marco, so what do you mean by that? And I'm going to say, I don't know. Because in every situation, every person is different. That's why Kardec writes that way. So everything possible. So if in my situation right now, what is it possible for me to help someone? Sometimes maybe just a prayer. Maybe that's all I can do in certain scenarios. But if you examine your mind a little bit, maybe you have more. Is it financial? Yeah, some people need financial help, but not all the time. You know, emotional support may weigh a lot more than financial support. And we forget about it, right? Spiritual support is important, right? And we can do that. But the little things in life are important too. So here, imagine this amazing spiritist, like going to the Spiritist Center every day and leading studies and doing all those things. And then someone's cut him off in traffic and then he wants to get out of the car and punch someone. I don't know, right? Think about this. What about that individual that does all these amazing things, but forget to say good morning to the person who helps them with the door or something, or, go grab his car for him? Can you believe this? And I'll tell you a story. And this story is interesting because that was when I was living in New York. And that's, when I was, being first introduced to really in-depth reading and study of Spiritism. And I remember every single day I walked into this very, very nice building, a multi-million-dollar building that was used to do my postdoctoral research in New York City, and all those individuals coming in and out, and there was one security guard that was sitting behind a desk every single day. And the desk was actually far away from the entrance, so there were about 30 feet distance, probably at least, from the door to this place. And everyone would walk by, and I could see that every day, people going up the elevators and things, and minding their business, and and there was this security guard, as a female guard, and one day I don't, obviously I was hearing the influence of my Spiritist friends, my mentor probably at the time, and I had this instinct of saying, I should talk to this person. Like, what challenging situation might be? It's not as easy, as you probably think. Then I came by, and then I changed my routine and say, good morning, how are you doing? And that's all I said. This person started crying, and incredibly emotional, and I remember that day, there was one of the most touching experiments I've ever done. And it's something completely, probably someone's going to say, oh, that's so silly. Like you said, good morning to someone. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I said. But I mean, that is exactly how sometimes you can change someone's life. So you ask me, well, what is it possible for you to do? And I'm like, oh my goodness, just like you can do so much that we're just not even thinking about, right? And we went into an interesting conversation that day about a lot of things in life. And then in the end, she said, you were the first person that tells me good morning this entire week. Right? That actually that believe that I actually exist. Right? Obviously, she was going through some other hardships in life, and I didn't know about this, but that was the connection. That was how I connected, and that's how I probably made a difference. And every time after that, that's something that got stuck with me. And it happened at least 3 or 4 more times that I came to say something to someone almost like randomly, and somehow it changed someone's life and mine, because it's almost like in a selfish way, I'm actually helping myself too. by helping others, you know? And then I'll keep going here. So if they have voluntarily disregarded any occasion, and that's what Kardec is telling us, to be useful, right? Disregarded a situation to be useful. So how can you be useful? I don't have that answer for you, right? There's a long list of things that you can think about, right? But it is an exercise we should all do every day, right? If anyone has any complaint to make of them, and finally, if they have done to others everything they would wish have done to themselves, right? That is the exercise, Gospel according to Spiritism, that we should that we should do every day. And Kardec is telling us to do that, right? And I really challenge you to do it, right? And this is something that you might find transformational in a way, right? To get those things. So let's keep going. So let's talk about the continuing the same concept in the Gospel according to Spiritism, and the chapter is called "Be Perfect," right? Chapter 17, "Be Perfect." The moral person, and Kardec continues, the moral persons are kind, humane, benevolent towards all, regardless of race or creed, or because they regard people as their brothers and sisters. Now, why is this critical, right? One, I already talked about this. Some individuals in Spiritism who somehow believe they detain the source of knowledge and it's theirs, same like humanity has done for the entire existence. We're just repeating it again in Spiritism. So maybe because I've seen that, and that happens still with every single religion or enterprise out there, people believe that somehow they're anointed, right? They detain the knowledge and therefore they're different, or some sort of superiority, right? But realistically, the moral person is the one that is kind, humane, and benevolent towards all. And the second of all, because we're probably going to one of the most critical times, right, in our existences, where we're seeing people fighting each other because political parties, or because I believe in different ideologies, or because I don't like that person, or I like that person, or I believe in this, disease, or I don't believe in this, or I disagree with science, or I agree with science. We're getting to a moment where this polarity in our existences are creating scenarios where someone can see out there as like, oh, this is a break, this is a separation, this is a polarization. But at the same time, that's exactly when we're exposed right in our face with opportunity to change. Isn't that so? Why do you think God allows these things to happen? Because we're creating this. It's not God's fault. Please leave God out of this, right? We tend to keep saying things to God all the time, but so God created us, allowed us to have an ability of use our free will, and through our use of free will, we got to situations where we tend to stand off, and standoff moments are really moments where the decision is critical, isn't it? Think about it, right? When you're in a standoff situation, you always have an option. Am I going to jump off to the other side and create something worse, or I'm going to think about everything and say, what really is important here? How can we work things out? It doesn't mean I have to believe exactly what everyone else believes. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what it's saying is that I have to abide to my kindness and humanity. That's what Kardec's saying. So Kardec is really contemporary, right? And independent of race or creed or beliefs, right? So how many times I see in Spiritist lectures, right, individuals saying, oh, by the way, but the Christians, they've done this, and that wrong. I'm like, that's fantastic. And by the way, this is exactly why we're here, because if it wasn't for that entire concept being devolved for so many hundreds of years, I would not have the opportunity today even to study Spiritism. And because I know this, that's fantastic. So, hopefully one day everyone's going to have access to the same information. Because Spiritism, we're going to continue receiving information too. right? That's the interesting component of what we study and what we understand. Do we know everything in Spiritism? No. The spirits, in every book, they're telling us this is what you have the ability to know right now, which is that it's this tiny little drop in water, right? Here you go. So you take this little dose of medication now, which is like just 5 milliliters, right? And then you have it, right? Make use of it, and then I'll give you 3 more, right? That's what Spiritism, right? So, and we're still, creating situations here to make things harder for everyone. But let's keep on the main focus, right? Let's keep going. The moral person, right? So moral person, they hold no hatred or rancor, desire for vengeance, right? Following Jesus' example, they forgive and forget offenses. They remember only the good deeds because they know they'll be forgiven according to how they themselves have forgiven. They are indulgent toward others' weaknesses, for they know that they themselves need indulgence. They recall these words of Christ, let him who is without, I'll say it again, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Remember, we hear this all the time, right? That's all in Allan Kardec. Okay, I hope you guys are all following through, and we're kind of sticking to this interesting concept that we actually should all know, but it's always important to remember. Now we're gonna do a little jump now to the Genesis, and I'm gonna again excuse me myself just 1 second. I just need to turn on my lights now because now it's getting darker, right? But let me 1 second. There you go. Now it's a lot better. So in Genesis chapter 15, Allan Kardec is going to say this. So why are we here, right? Isn't that an interesting question? I ask this quite often. So it's most sincere adherents, right? And not those who have been impressed, us, talking about us, by the sight of extraordinary phenomena. We all know what happens when we're stuck into the phenomenon, right? We have examples down from Brazil all the time, a very recent one. We have examples all over the place, right? But those who have been touched in their souls by consolation, those who have been freed from the torments of doubt, those whose courage have been revealed in afflictions, who gained strength and certainty of the future which is brought to them, the knowledge of their spiritual being, right? And that's from the Genesis chapter 15. So here we are. We are the sincere adherents, sincere learners, as I like to say, of everything that we have in front of us in Spiritism. Okay? And now, just to finalize in the last few minutes here, so we have some time for questions afterwards. What is happening today? We're seeing obviously many discussions in Spiritism, in all levels of Spiritism, from the Spiritist Center down to regional associations or federations, right, to higher level international federations and associations in Spiritism. We're looking at a lot of debates going on about we as Spiritists or a movement Spiritists, how do we organize this, right? That's another level that we really have to discuss at some point. And we're seeing a lot of noise here and there about translations that were not done properly, and books that have this or that message that should not have that. And we're seeing all this technical details about the formatting and the translation and that word and this word, which is important, right? We need to somehow keep all ourselves in check, right? That's that. Kardec actually said that we should always review things, right? We should always critically analyze things before we say anything. It's better to refute 9 truths than accepting 1 lie going through, right? That's a primary concept. But at the same time, every time we spend too much time going through those points, we kind of forget about the moral concept of really this is the binding structure of who we are. And that's what we talked about so far, right? So we really look at this lack of focus on the simplicity of the moral concept. And Kardec, not for any other reason, but Kardec dedicates the entire introduction of his books to that exact same concept. So we don't become this more Pharisaic look into tiny little details and things than the big concept that we need to adhere to and follow. So this is not a criticism to any institution specifically, but this is more a moment for us individually to think about who we are and what are we doing, right? We always have to be careful about overemphasizing these tiered organizational systems, right? Without looking at individual needs or the individual places. And, this is something obviously that everyone out there is doing at the International Spiritist Council, at the local federations in the States and in Canada, where I take part too. We're always very careful about this, but individually, we should always be careful about this, right? When someone in Spiritism appears to be detaining somehow of this moral superiority without action, so we always have to be careful and question, like, what is this? Is this really, something that I should be following, right? And for everyone out there in Spiritism, we should always be thinking about critically about who we are and the moral guiding principles of the laws of God, right? We should always be very careful about not allowing Spiritism to be some sort of a type of knowledge that is really only for those who are selected to have some sort of superior intellectual properties, or highly educated individuals who are really studying really hard in Spiritism and detain all the knowledge. Because what Spiritism did was exactly the opposite of that, right? Through allowing this information to run freely through multiple places around the world, through different spiritists, to different mediums, and now coordinated this effort through Kardec and centralizing it, Spiritism allow us, for all of us, to go through it, to the source, to read, to understand, and to act on it, right? So it is very important that we don't bring our baggage from previous incarnations where one or two or three individuals somehow appearing to have all the knowledge about this, starting telling us kind of what to do, and we become followers of someone. And this is happening in Spiritism every single day. It's like, oh, you're Spiritist, yeah, so I follow this guy. I'm like, that's interesting. I tend to follow Jesus most of the time, Sometimes I don't do it just because I'm still a stubborn learner and I kind of ignore his rules, and I admit to that, and I'm working on that. But, he's my guide, right? And Kardec, right? Oh, but I like the works of this guy and I follow him, and that's great. I'm like, that's fantastic. So just remember that really the source from there is actually coming, from Kardec. So kind of go back to it whenever we have a chance, right? Or the concept that it is almost like a subclass of individuals who are these intellectuals, right? Who somehow, so we have to be very careful with that, right? And this is not a criticism of particular individuals or institutions, but more for every one of us, like the little guys down here learning Spiritism, to think about this, right? And keep that in mind. Leon Denis gave us a big warning, right? And here and hereafter, he writes this. So Spiritism will be what we do with it, right? So we have to take care of it. We have to protect it somehow, and the way you protect it is kind of going back to the source. Go back to Kardec, right? Go back to Jesus. It's kind of funny to say that because apparently, like, we're supposed to have that all the time, but sometimes we don't, right? And we got lost in many occasions into technicalities of things, and that's the same thing we've done before when we incarnated in other religions, right? So that is one of the warnings, right? And now, finally, so what we're going to do now is, you know, um, really, from everything that's happening throughout the world today, we do understand that, individuals can fail, can commit mistakes, and they'll learn from it. And the institutions can do the same, right? And we should not confuse mistakes that are that may have happened from particular individuals with Spiritism, right? Because sometimes people make connections. Say, "Oh, Spiritism is like that. See, I told you, right? That guy did this. That's really bad." It's like, no, right? That's not the case, and we should always be with our eyes really open, our ears really open to understand, that anyone can make mistakes, right? In Spiritism or not in Spiritism. Question 886 of the Spiritist book. Kardec's going to ask this. I'm going to read directly from the book again. It's like, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood, right? And that's kind of our final message today. He's going to say benevolence towards everyone. Oh, but even the guy that told me that the vaccine doesn't work, it's like, what can I do? What I can do, instead of sending him all these negative thoughts and like these pierces of energy and wishing negative things. And how many times we're doing this in the pandemic? Think about this. I'm actually, at least the minimum thing I could do is to send good vibrations to those individuals. And obviously, of course, we try to talk and try to convince somehow, but sometimes we can't. Right? People still have their free will, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we're all learning from things, right? And I hope that one day, we're all going to learn from this, right? And and so indulgence for the imperfections of others, right? Because we do have those too. And come on, it's a time for us to really come to our senses and understand that we probably have made a lot more mistakes than everyone out there. And that's probably why God said, you know what, send this guy to be a spiritist, send this guy to participate in a medium's meeting. Maybe that's a chance he has that I'm going to hammer in his head that he needs to learn this. And I think that's me. I really believe that. So I don't think in any way I'm actually, up higher in my moral evolution. I think I'm actually really, really down there. And it's like, this is a time that I have to work hard on this. And thank you for allowing me to kind of do something for it, right? Being here is actually, I think, important for me, right? And just to finish, Kardec says, again, according to Spiritism, they are indulgent towards others' weaknesses, for they know that themselves need indulgence, right? And they recall those words of Christ, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, as we said before, right? The gospel to according to Spiritism. Okay, so this is the message of today about being good spiritists, and really, I think I want to emphasize that is the idea that we're looking at the efforts of following our road of moral evolution, right? And that's what and following the laws of God, because really this is the core concept that can't be discussed, can't be argued. And this is what binds and unites all of us. It doesn't matter which religion we're coming from or which concept we have in our mind of what we disagree or agree with. This should be the unison, like the note that connects all our voices in the universe. And we should strive and work really hard to be more benevolent to others, right? Use our toolbox, right, of indulgence to imperfections. And this is how we're being good spiritists. And there's so many of us right there, knowing or not knowing Kardec. So we're blessed that we have a chance to know this. And may we do the work. Otherwise, we're going to be the ones down there where Kardec met all the ones suffering. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm ready to have some questions today.
Michael, thank you so much for connecting with us and delivering this amazing message, sharing with us these different perspectives, these reminders, right, that are so obvious right in front of us. For us, spiritists or not, and sometimes we take for granted, right? And it's again, it's so apparent, it's screaming all at us, and in
Yeah.
such a way, in an invitational mode, obviously, but it's definitely something that we have to rescue. Um, uh, Recently, I was actually I came across a study of a that I was doing. I came across a passage of a book that reminds us that yes, it is important for us to study the different books that we have in the spiritist literature, but never forget the basis, right? Never forget the connection with our Master Jesus that we have as the main principle, as the main basis for our moral change. So thank you for reminding us of that. And we have many of us who were gave us their warm felt hugs as well, here saying welcome, and welcoming this amazing message that we have, that you have brought for us. But what I would like to do is to utilize our time well, and make sure that we dive into the questions, the comments that they were made here, and make sure that we are learning even more with your expertise, with your knowledge in this topic. I would like to start with Daniel, where he said, "Thank you, Marco, for these great reminders." So, in your view, how would you explain Spiritism to someone who has never heard about these teachings, especially when you are living in another country?
Fantastic. I think that is a fantastic question, and that's something that I've obviously experienced so many times, right? In work, and sometimes in environments that are not necessarily spiritist environments, right? And also interesting to that same question is that and it's clear when you start working in Spiritism, and working on fraternal assistance, and mediumistic meetings, and or cleaning the spiritist house. Doesn't matter where you're working with, you tend to receive a lot of spirits that come to you, right, through all the connection spiritual world, and many of them in want to know about and Spiritism, although they may not even ask about Spiritism, but they kind of want to know something, or they want to support, or they want to help. So usually my way of introducing Spiritism to people, right, it's a really, really basic one. So the first thing I would mention is that really what we believe, right? And I tend not to be too technical about explaining things, although I do love the technical aspect of Spiritism and all the scientific, that's where my background's from. So I'm really into it, but I tend not to mention that too much unless I'm in a specific environment for that, right? Which is a different type of study, different scenario. But I basically start saying that, now we believe that we should love one another. That's really like how I start the conversation, because realistically, that's really what unites us all, right? We believe in God. Spiritism is a movement that involves a religion component, like a scientific perspective, right? And this overarching moral principle that we should love one another. And I even say that this is not new. This is something that almost every single religion believes in. And the interesting thing about Spiritism is that we've learned this through a combination of spiritual mediumistic events, and also through many other sources, and we believe in Jesus and the gospel of Jesus, and we kind of combine it all together in this body of work that we call Spiritism. But reality is, like, that body of work really signals to us that we should be like brothers and sisters. And that's my starter, because the more I emphasize the uniting points about who we are, the more you disintegrate the barrier that surrounds us, right? And I've experienced before situations where someone was kind of explaining, and I've made that mistake before when I was very early into Spiritism. I really wanted to show people how incredibly advanced this thing is, and all this, and that flopped badly, right? Because realistically, I'm overemphasizing differences, right? when I do that. And for someone who doesn't know, Spiritism is actually exactly the barrier that exists, right? And I'm actually emphasizing that. By taking the approach of telling people that Spiritism is nothing more than believing and acting on the law of God, which tells us that we're the same and should we love each other, barriers are gone. There's no barriers on that. We already can connect, and it doesn't matter what the background of the person, right? And therefore, from that point on, I think the conversation continues, right?
Thank you, Marco, and very, very, let's say, simplistic but amazing way to start a conversation or to help our brothers and sisters understand what we're trying to accomplish when we follow this amazing science. So, thank you for that. Yas Korakava says, "Great topic. Don't you agree that for us to make effort to make our moral elevation, we have first to be aware we missed the target and hurt people or the system we are in? Or somehow we did not meet the expectations we have set yet. So it seems that to be a good spiritist, we have to get out of sleepy conscience, to awake and feel uneasy or bothered by the state we are or things are. What are the more effective ways to speed up this awakening?" Wow.
Another, Yasko, thank you for the question. That's really, we can probably have another 2 hour seminar on just that question alone, which I really like. And that's something I really talk a lot about. And even here at Spiritism and the Toronto Spirit Society, and when I, when I have a chance to, is the awakening, right? And as you properly mentioned, we are at a stage that the awakening typically comes from suffering, right? And it doesn't mean suffering by a particular violent act or something that happened or loss. It may be the suffering that is within us. It could be, the frustration. It could be the depression. It could be the anxiety. It could be the stress. It could be the boiling emotions that are not regulated enough inside of us and are really speaking towards us that something's got to change. And that really, in a psychological perspective, really the driver a lot of our changes, right? Now, so how the awakening can be done, obviously we don't have to go through that, right? But, being aware of what is out there helps us spread a little, open our vision towards where we could be, right? And that will be the more positive way of having that awakening. In some individuals that doesn't work, and obviously some sort of catastrophic level event will actually bring them up to reality and will open their eyes. But for all of us, right, that we can't avoid that, right? We don't have to go there, right? But for all of us that would need that type of awakening, right, to move towards the direction where the Spiritism is trying to tell us to go, the easiest way to do it will be to examining conscious. That's exactly like Kardec's telling us. And by examining our conscience, we can start in like tiny little bricks at a time, right? Move ourselves out of a zone of comfort, right? And understanding that, hey, maybe I can work on this, right? Maybe I should go that way, right? And then the knowledge from Spiritism really fills that gap. It's like you open a little bucket there, and then the information comes in and fulfills that step that is needed to build your foundation, right? Now, there are many, many strategies. I think examining our conscience is a great one, but also observing the goodness and the positive things of the surroundings is another one, right? So you can project and look around you and see, your references, right? And if you set up your reference as someone in Spiritism or someone who does a great job in charity somewhere, or someone like my friends when I was starting to study Spiritism, they were just genuinely happy even when things were really bad around them. And that was an awakening for me. I was like, how is that even possible? Right? So there are many routes, but it's very important for us to emphasize the positive aspect of that awakening and not allow ourselves necessarily to go through a crashing situation where we are kind of jolted into transformation, right? Like it happens to a bunch of us, right? So that will be my way of starting that. Let's put it that way.
Thank you so much for addressing that very hard question. And then Paula asked another one that it's very challenging too. Do you think Spiritists may overvalue, intellect because reasoning is a main tenet of Spiritism?
No, I think that's a good point, and I think I don't see it as Spiritism overvaluing the intellect. I think our individuals who are struggling to go into the moral wing overvaluing the knowledge, because the knowledge is a lot easier for you to acquire. So it's not that the Spiritism is doing that. I think we obviously do what's more comfortable for us to do, right? So if I tell someone that they have to read 100 pages of this book, right, and they have to memorize that, most people will probably do, right? And that's a relatively easy thing to do. It's just like we did when Martin Luther was that time talking about indulgences, right? That's exactly what he was talking about, and Kardec was connecting to him in that same idea, right? So it's a lot easier for me to kind of pay for this mass and get things done, right? So it's a lot easier for me to acquire incredible knowledge and be hooked by, the fact that, this medium in 18 something told me that this was going to happen in 1900s. Wow, that's amazing. That's Spiritism. No, that's not Spiritism. That's a mediumistic communication that occurred, which is great. But, when I tell people, say, hey, by the way, it's great that you're reading the book. Now actually you have to do it. That's when things start to get a little bit more complicated. So in a way, I think we as individuals we're not overvalue, but we tend to lean towards things that are a lot easier to do versus things that require us a lot of efforts to do. And that's why Kardec's telling us all the time. And in Spiritism, the basic principle is that, yes, those two things have to come together, right? But for you to really tell me that you're moving toward, you're a good Spiritist, you have to do both. Right? And this moral concept is really what's going to tell me if you're putting that in practice. And again, we tend to do things where we're more comfortable, right? And changing moral perspectives is always the hardest thing to do. And I think that's why.
Thank you. That is true. That depends on the person's perspective as well. So I want to read, before I go to the next questions, what Paula also mentioned. Your message resonates in my heart like the true, simple message of Jesus to love one another, which includes everyone. And then Kirsten said, "I love the perspective you are bringing, Marco. Very heartfelt and genuine as well."
Thanks, Kirsten.
Going back to questions. I asked, have you ever met
this guy?
All right, that guy, right? Who's that guy? Have you ever met someone who felt pressured by the spiritual and moral changes that Spiritism proposes? And if so, if one feels pressured, what can he or she do?
So Leo, I see this every day. I see this every day in Spiritism, in my center, in other centers, and I see this idea is that the idea that when you start studying Spiritism, there's always this intermediate moment in your evolution there within Spiritism that you get overwhelmed because you start to realize, hey, like all those things are actually not right. I mean, there's just something wrong about everything that I'm reading in these books. And I see these books, I see these amazing stories Andrea Luiz bring it to me, and and I do this, and oh my God, I do this too. Oh, this is chaotic. I don't understand. So there's always this pressure of like, I gotta excel. I can't be that person. And then because this is our drive, right? We somehow tend to look at things on that perspective in a way that I can see that individual being morally perfect or getting there, and I'm like, okay, I gotta be like that, right? Not realizing that there are hundreds of incarnations that probably happen for that individual to make one single step in changing the right direction, right? And I think that at the same time that you can be somewhat overwhelmed about that body of knowledge that you were exposed in the beginning, that is exactly the same knowledge that a spiritist is going to bring in this, in the other side, is going to tell us like, hey, listen to me, come here. We are here working towards progression, but we're all doing steps in the right direction. It doesn't matter if I do 100 steps today, a 10 at a time, a 20. We do what we can. We take responsibility for things, and and we take one step at a time, and emphasizing to individuals that, yeah, this road is long. I gotta keep moving, right? But the idea is that if you make one single positive change, right, and you really stick to it, and you understand this, that may be what you need right now, like, and that may be what you've been struggling to do for 1,000 years, right? Maybe we just came to this incarnation just to realize that I need to love my mother, which is incarnated with me, and by the way, my mother killed me 100 times before, like, and there are little things we can do. And Spiritism give us that perspective too. And I think we in Spiritism have to, and I try to do that all the time, is that I tell people, hey, listen, this is an example, that this is what we're learning today. And by the way, like, we in our own existences are going through our struggles and our challenges and our difficulties. And let's take one little one of those at a time. Let's work on them and let's make it better, right? So if you're making the steps in the right direction, that's what we need to do. And that takes away some of that pressure of like, everything is horrible. I'm worthless. I can't do any of this. Like, so that's how I would take it.
I thank you so much. That really clarifies a lot of the doubts that sometimes our brothers and sisters have about these teachings, because it can be overwhelming, especially when we're thrown, right?
I
Without,
was there. I can tell you. Yeah.
yes, and we see this in and day out. So thank you. Continuing with our series of questions, Kirsten asks, it's always our desire to be a good spiritist, but it's so easy to fall short. What internal conversations should we be having with ourselves so we don't become so discouraged?
Yeah. Kirsten, I'll take that's a great question. I will take the example. I think Andrea Luis gives us a very good message on that, and also Stephen. So I'll start with Andrea Luis first. So remember when he first gets there, right? Doctor, I do all of this. I'm such a knowledgeable guy. I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna be the star, right? I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna cure people, all the spirits suffering. Here I am. Don't worry. Andrea Luis is here, right? So he gets there in Asolar, and he's given a bucket, right, and a mop, right, spiritually speaking, right, and say, here's what you got to do. You're going to actually start. Let's see if you're worth it right now to clean the floor, right, because I don't even know if you're ready yet, right? That's kind of the conversation they have. And he struggles, right, big time, right, because it's and then he'll get it. Like, it takes some time, but he finally realizes that his perspective on things. And the other one is from Stephen, and you remember this when Stephen has obviously someone has the plague and dying, and this same guy that is on the boat, he's a slave on, and he's a slave on a boat, has someone as a plague, and he offers himself to go take care of that guy, although he's actually in a position that a lot very different from him, and he takes on that opportunity, right? And he kind of follows through with that, right? So for us, like, looking at perspectives we have, is like, the big question for us, like, what are the targets I'm setting right now for me? And that's what Andrea Luis gives us the perspective. If I set my target here, then it's going to be hard, and I'm going to always fall short, right? And that's going to give me a lot of depression, a lot of stress, right? Unnecessarily, because I'm trying to set a target that is going to be reached, but not now, right? So the whole concept of breaking down targets, right, and setting up steps, what I need to do to take to that, give us the reassurance of knowing that I'm moving, right? And also the reward that comes from accomplishing something, right? And Andrea Luis does exactly that. That little part of the book sometimes is forgotten, right? But he is rewarding himself for example, the first time is just completing the job, right? He actually finishes cleaning, right? And that to him was the reward he needed to move on. And he realized he didn't fall short at that time, right? And I think, and the other spectrum of it is Stephen, who's so well morally developed that his target is right now 10 times bigger than everyone around him, and he falls through. So just to give you the range of what we could expect from ourselves, this is another pandemic that happens in our world today, is exactly people and society expecting a lot more from everyone, including babies, right? They're expected to be, doing things, a lot earlier with a lot more pressure and falling short and going through, very difficult times in adulthood. And I think what you bring in Spiritism is exactly the same line of thought where, when we're studying and learning all these moral principles and learning about this, we have to set targets that are achievable. And they may be as basic as, tomorrow I'm going to wake up with a smile, right? Who does that, right? Just think about it, right? Tomorrow, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to say thank you to my, to my wife, just for being here with me. I don't know, right? Tiny little targets, but we'll give you the reward of saying, my goodness, I accomplished something today. I can move on, right? Andrea Luis told us that. And he finally now guides us through the knowledge that we have in Spiritism, a bunch of it, right, that came after in Spiritism, through the little steps of first in learning how to operate a mob, right? And I think, if we take that for our lives, I think it's going to be very beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you, Marco. Very well said. It's interesting that we're all vibrating the same direction here, because the next comment with the next questions, would say, is related to family, is related to the little ones. It's going to be two questions, because Alba asked the first question, then Kirsten had a follow-up on it as well, that I think you should be able to answer both of them. I will put them up on the screen so you can kind of read together. Sure. As Alba says, thank you, Marco. As a Spiritist parent, what is the main lesson, teaching, that you want to give your children? And then Kirsten says, to also pick back off Alba's question a little, as a busy parent and having a career, how do you manage Spiritist events, meetings, and family life?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I know. Let's start another lecture. No. So first for Alba. So Alba, by the way, it's nice to kind of have you here. It's been a while. So I think the first thing, and that's something that I kind of implement into with now 3 kids, right? So is really teaching them some really, really basic things, right? And I'll give you a perspective that obviously, I obviously have learned through also participating in spirit education for kids and for babies, but also as a parent, as a spiritist, and backed by what Allan Kardec is telling us to, right? So let's kind of trying to concise that into one example. So one of the very first things I implemented, and I say, okay, let's learn this little step, is to be thankful, right? So I said, you know what? It's important we're going to start with this. So we're going to be thankful. And then what we implemented, for example, is like, every time we're having a meal, every time we're doing anything in family, every time we're going to bed at night, we stop. And then they're really good at that now. So they're going to stop and say, okay, what are we being thankful for today? Right? And then I let them do it, right? In a very easy way, adjust to the level of the knowledge, obviously, of development and the kids. So, and allow them to think in their mind the exercise that Kardec just told us to do, right? In the lecture, and prompting them to understand the value of, having people around them and having love and God in their lives and things like this. And I let them follow through with that concept, right? They learn a lot more than we think. Right. And sometimes we think we're teaching them and they're teaching us. Right. And that happens all the time. So that was the first thing I've implemented. And it worked really well. So the next step, I said, you know what, now that we're kind of learning to be thankful, right? So what's the next thing we're going to do? So then I started to implement little things like, for example, let's try to do one action, right? That goes towards the whole concept of loving one another. And just one, like I just wanted to kind of rehash that and rethink about that every day. And then I started to implement that. So now we're being thankful, and now we're actually doing something that others will be thankful. See how that works, right? And then by doing that exercise of kind of seeing how other people are going to be thankful for what I'm doing and how I'm thankful for what other people are doing, I think I've implemented some sort of basic concepts of like what is really what we're doing. And it does work well. And it's part of, obviously, we can go into details about the methodological concepts of this, where they come from. They come from the Pestalozzi concept, right? And then the Pestalozzi with the moral development, they implemented this self-driven development of experiences, and that's kind of how the concept comes from. Obviously, I don't have time to talk about Pestalozzi today, but that will be a very like a guiding principle. Let's put it that way. Let them incorporate in their own thoughts what is the consequences of being good, right? And how positive it is. Oh, and by the way, second part. Sorry, I didn't forget you, Kristen. So the second part, I think that is very challenging, right? And obviously, we have to make the decision sometimes of how much we're going to be participating physically in the Spiritist Center versus, what activities we're going to do and how much we can do in balance with the kids and how we're going to take the kids into that, experiences, right? So, for everyone is a different experience. For example, in Toronto Spirit Society, we had, for example, the kids activity happened at the same time as the lecture. So that was great. I took the kids in and we had a great Sunday family time and the Spirit Center. And I could still alternate, with the mediumistic meetings but then I had to let go of coordinating some of the studies because it was physically impossible to balance that all out. And in the end, we have many responsibilities, and obviously in Spiritism, we're here for this mission. We got to do this, right? So it's our call. We got to take this responsibility. But at the same time, family, as Jesus is telling us to, like, everything comes down from what we're learning, that would come first, right? And the healthy and development of your family is critical. And that is the key point. So what I'm saying is that, yes, don't worry, we're going to have time to go and work a lot more on this, right? But right now, for example, obviously I had to refocus some of my energy towards them. And I think that's the responsibility that I also learned from Spiritism, right? And for every family is different because, for example, right now with the pandemic and changes in schedule work and I also had to let go of all the responsibilities in the center. But again, everything is very fluid and dynamic. And I think it comes to a point that we have to keep asking ourselves, what can I do more? Am I doing everything I could? And balancing that is challenging, but at the same time, it's individualized. And it's important for everyone not to ask too much from themselves, right? Because that will be more problematic than anything else you are trying to do or not doing, right? And I think that is very important, okay?
Very well said. This idea of bringing balance, right, in our lives, and sometimes we want to hold the whole world with our arms, and guess what? It's not long enough. But thank you for clarifying that. I have the last comment or question, and I would like to go ahead and read it, and now you can say your final words, and then we'll finalize with our final prayer. And this amazing evening. Unfortunately, we have to end. We all have other things to do. We have our families to go back to, as you mentioned. But Jasko says the following: to force to be exposed to all sorts of diversity, cultural, social status, racism, etc., in early childhood would help to awake us for the good later.
So I think it depends on several factors. First of all, it depends on us as spirits, how we are evolved in that sense, right? So that's the first thing. Second, it depends on how we are exposed to it, right? Let's give an example. Like if I'm a spirit that have come to this particular incarnation with challenges in that concept, and I'm exposed to an environment where those differences are not seen as positive, then the likelihood of me reinforcing my own negative approach to those differences in life are much higher. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do it, but it means that your odds are not in favor of you, right? If you're exposed, if you're the same spirit, but exposed to the early childhood where the differences are seen as a positive, incorporating experiences, and the harmony and learning opportunities are highlighted, then obviously the odds of me taking that and learning that and moving on that direction are much higher. So in a way, when you're dealing with the moral development of a kid, that early childhood environment and how the experiences are portrayed to the kid makes a very significant difference. So in a way, think of it this way. So the spirituality, looking at analyzing your family and say, these are the spirits that are going to be incarnating. This spirit needs to learn this. They have to go through these challenges. We're going to set them up in this particular scenario. So nothing happens by chance, right? And then giving the ability of that family to mitigate or to emphasize the positive things or mitigate the negative things. That is your best case scenario. And then it's up to you as a spirit to take that opportunity and move on. So in a way, yes, a multicultural diverse society will allow us to challenge that. If we have issues with that, it will help us to challenge that and move on. It will be a great opportunity to learn, and obviously will improve our chances of more evolution. That's certainly. But there are factors that are part of our evolution still that may make it harder or may make it easier, right? And they have to be taken into consideration too. But in general, the answer is yes, it would be very important, unless you're brought in an environment where that is not seen in a positive way, which again it's not gonna make it definitive that you're gonna do the same, but it will just make it a lot more challenging for you to go through that same task, right? And that is all part of the divine the assistance that we have to kind of put it all together as this little puzzle, right? These little gears that connect to each other so the whole thing can spin, right? And these are experiences that are very valuable. And now I think it's changing. I think, in general, our society, I think we're reaching points where we're digesting mistakes from the past. We're revisiting our own racism and bigotry and biases, and that is obviously being flourished everywhere. But also at the same time, the anti-that movement is really what comes out of it, right? And it's part of it. And I think that is part of the change that's going to make us go into regeneration, is exactly dealing with this in a more open way. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that not that we have to go through this, but since we decided to go through this, there has to be a moment where we all as a society have to look inside of us and say, hey, we got to change this. This is too much. All right.
Marcos, I would like to thank you once more for this amazing explanation, for this amazing talk. I would like to speak now for all of us here at the SSB, those who have followed us. You have earned with us this afternoon into this evening the title of a good spiritist. Because you have showed us, brought us these amazing reminders, a lot of teachings as well that we need to put into place and help ourselves in connection with Spiritism, but as well as with one another when we are treating whether other Spiritists or not. The teachings that we have learned from our Master Jesus. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We wish you well and your family as well, and we wish that the little one that is coming will be arriving here soon, bring a lot of joy for all your family and all of us. Perhaps will become another good spiritist as well. So we
work on that.
Right, exactly. With all the teachings that you brought, we do have some other questions that we would like to ask, but we'll put that aside and we'll send it to you so you can actually go back to those individuals and address them. But
Absolutely.
Before we go, we thank you and let us pray so we can part and again continue to be in this positive way, right? So we thank you, dear Lord, for this amazing moment that we had to connect with friends from another country, from another arena of life different than ours, but who truly is struggling, is working hard to be a good citizen of this amazing universe. The vast amount of information that we have received the different examples that we have come across, they all serve a purpose in our lives as we put them into action. Always with your guidance, with your support, we are thankful for having one another, for knowing that we're not alone. We're seeking happiness individually and collectively in all sorts way of life, arenas, and conditions. We pray that each one of us may put these teachings into practice, asking that we develop a better tomorrow for all of us, and soon this planet, becoming a planet of regeneration, can see faster changes into the more arena that we have wished for ourselves and for others. We thank you, and so be it.
Okay.